My name is Rob Kaplan. I want to welcome you to the school committee candidates debate. And that's about as formal as it's going to be. I was asked to moderate tonight. So I think what we'll do is I'm going to give every candidate, what do you think, 3 minutes to introduce yourself and say something about your platform? Okay. So we'll go through the candidates, 3 minutes each, and then we're going to open up the floor to questions. So I hope some of you have come with some questions. From my perspective as a parent, there's some interesting times ahead for our school committee. We're in our third head of the school superintendent in what, 4 years? 34 years or something like that.
Yeah.
We're looking at completely redoing the middle schools, and there are lots of repercussions around that. In the past 5 or 6 years, a lot of programs have been cut, slashed, and I'm sure that the school committee and the school teachers and the school administrators would like to find ways to rebuild that. And the question is, how do you do that in today's budget, or do you need to do something to increase the budget, something dramatic? So there are challenging times. And then when we go to question and answers, I think what I'll do is try and keep rough time check. I'll give every candidate 2 minutes to respond so that no one feels like they got shortchanged. If you've got more to say, we'll come back around and let you have part B. It's loose. So I will start on my far left with Bruce Mann.
Most people start on the far left with Bruce Mann, actually. Hi, thank you for coming out and braving the weather. My name is Bruce Mann. I'm a candidate for school committee. This is my 4th time around. In the 10 years that I've been on the school committee, there have been some really remarkable changes in the schools, and I would also venture to say there have been some changes that haven't happened that would be remarkable if they did happen. It's actually been, Rob, in the 10 years I've been on the school committee, I've worked with 5 superintendents. There have been 5 principals at the high school in that period of time, and 4 mayors. And that is not really sort of a recipe for continuity. There are tremendous challenges ahead, as there are every year. When I was deciding whether or not to run again, I talked to the superintendent, Dr. Kerbel, and he said, Bruce, you were around when we built the high school. If you run and are elected this time, you will be around. We built Bresnahan, and we'll fix the Knock Middle School, and that's quite a legacy to have for service. And I told Mark something that I really believe, that right now, the way things stand right now, my legacy is having added fees for gym, which were not here when I started, having added fees for school buses, which were not here when I started. I removed foreign language at the elementary school level, taking it away from my own daughter, and then when she got to the middle school, I was forced to take another vote to take foreign language away from her then. That is what I consider to be the legacy of the last 10 years. And I'm really pleased, and I've considered it a privilege. When I first ran 10 years ago, I called my service on the school committee really a conversation with the community. And that conversation is about what kind of a community we are. Who are we? And how is that reflected in the schools? I'd like to continue to participate in that conversation. There's some very exciting initiatives. The MCAS presentation last night that showed us, it was very interesting. In some of our grades, our math scores are not where we wanted to be, and our literacy, our English language arts scores are really, really quite good. And that reminded me that 5 years ago, when we did the reorganization, we had a wonderful presentation, a very compelling presentation about adding 2 literacy coaches for language arts and 2 math coaches for math to the school system. We added the 2 English language arts literacy coaches, cut back to 1 math coach. And even then, when we were cutting it back, I knew that it would be a decision that we would regret. It was sort of one of those penny wise, pound foolish decisions. So I look forward to being part of the conversation. I look forward to being challenged even tonight on some of the votes that I've taken, some of the choices I've made. And I appreciate it.
Very good. Thank you. Next, Audrey McCarthy.
Hi, I'm Audrey McCarthy. Most of you probably know me. It's actually my second time running for school committee. I ran back in the early 1990s. And that followed by that, I did not serve on the school committee, but following that, I served 10 years on the city council. And I have 4 children, ages 9 to 19. And 3 of them are in 3 different schools here in Newburyport. And like we said tonight, I think that there are some challenging times ahead for our schools. I am proud of our schools. I know that Newburyport ranks 16th in the top 50, according to Boston Magazine. I think it's something to be proud of. I definitely think we could be better. I think some of the decisions that have been made have had a ripple negative effect. We're not the only school system struggling. Not all of our problems are unique to us. But I feel that I could be a part of the solution. My relationship with the city council, having been on the city council, I think offers a strong link with the school committee. And I can appreciate all the hard work that Newburyport administratively has done, and I really see our role is continuing to support them. Our superintendent hasn't been here long, but certainly want to see continuity and longevity, and I think with the right kind of support from the school committee, hopefully there can be some more stability administratively for us. I too have discouraged some of the fees and some of the decisions we've made, I think have affected us negatively, but I think we can turn things around, and I think that, like I said, Newburyport has a lot to offer, and we are a very good school. My hope is that with the right school committee, we can make Newburyport a great school.
Very good. Thanks, Audrey. Now, Peter McClure.
Hello, I'm Peter McClure. I'm relatively an unknown. I've lived in Newburyport for 14 or 15 years. I'm always off by 1 year. And throughout the time, been always interested in what's been going on in the schools. I'm a teacher myself. I teach first, second, and third grade students in a small private school down in Boston. And I'm now a parent, and I'm a parent whose daughter's at the Bresnahan. And the reason why I'm running for school committee is because it's been disappointing to watch all the cuts that have been made in our time living here. And now that as a parent, I realize how our daughter ended up in the Bresnahan was really because we didn't have another choice. I'm a Montessori teacher by trade. My school in Boston is too far for my daughter to go to. We applied for the charter school and we're on the wait list. That's not going to happen. And the nice private Montessori school that we have in town is too pricey for us. So thinking about it, I'm realizing, why is it that we're making a choice of a school because it's the only option we have left? And what I really want to see is a school system where you have all these choices, or a community where you have all these choices, and you're making the right choice for your child so that you're not defaulting to what you think is not the right school. My daughter's education at the Bresnahan has been spectacular. She's had great teachers, and we're very happy with what she's been learning. But at the same time, we know that the schools can be greater, and we can do more things. We just have to be committed to following the vision, making sure there's not so much changes at the top. And then the other reason that I'm running for school committee is because I interview students locally for my alumni interviews for my college. And every time I interview someone from Newburyport, I just get the same response. No one really wants to come back. They had an okay time in high school, but really their better time with their friends. There was always one teacher that they really enjoyed. All the rest of them they weren't very happy with. And when you ask, what do you want to do? They'll say, oh, we want to go somewhere else. And I think that's sad. You want students to come back and you want them to feel proud about where they're coming from. And part of that feeling proud about where they're coming from is having a sense of pride of their school. And I want to make sure that we have a school system that our children are proud of. So that's why I'm running for school committee.
Thank you, Peter. And now, Nick DeCanter.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. We are really grateful for your interest in education in our schools. The past 4 years that I've served on the school committee, I think, have been a source of pride and at the same time a cause of frustration. Pride because our schools are doing some amazing things. I have 3 children who have gone through the school system, K through 12. They're all up in college now. And I have seen many of those pockets of excellence that have characterized our schools. Frustration because, as so many of my colleagues here have spoken, we're not where we should be. And there is a lot that we can do to be still better, to go from good to excellent. The kinds of things that I would like to do with your help is first to continue the kinds of conversations that we've had around student achievement, and in particular about preparing our kids for the world in the 21st century. The approaches to teaching kids have changed, the needs of kids have changed, and I'm struck by the fact that we are still using an industrial system, an agrarian calendar to teach 21st century skills. There's a disconnect there somewhere. We need to be more flexible, to allow for our kids to learn through bigger portions of the day. We need to take a look at how we are teaching some of the skills that are standard to anybody's success in today's world. Skills such as collaboration, communication, creativity, critical thinking. And that needs to happen throughout the system, starting in kindergarten. There's no reason we can't teach children to think critically in kindergarten. It also means that we need to strengthen our STEM, our science, technology, engineering, and math programs. It also means that we need to prepare for a global environment that our kids operate in right now, with exposure to other languages and other cultures. So there's a lot of work to be done. And it's exciting because I see, over the past 4 years, I have seen that we've been working at it and making things happen little by little, really largely to a lot of individual efforts. And I think we can continue to do that. I would be happy to continue with the process that we have started and look forward to continuing with that.
Excellent. Thank all of you. That was excellent. Very good start. So we're at the portion of the evening where I want to invite you, our citizens, to ask questions. Please just let us know if it's a question that's specific to one candidate or if you're asking all of the candidates to respond. Obviously, the latter kind of creates the debate atmosphere. So, sir, please.
I would like to thank the members for running. It's a very difficult job. But I have one question. Do you think the schools of today are assuming too many responsibilities, what they shouldn't be doing, psychiatrists, social workers, bullying, in the meantime teaching them a little reading, writing, arithmetic? I'm a volunteer surrogate parent, and I travel around to different schools. And the morale in the schools are not good. The teachers feel they have no freedom to do anything. They're handicapped by state and federal handicaps. In other words, Congress is ready to authorize the new Elementary and Secondary Act, which provides funds for the cities and towns, with the caveat that the students by 2014 would meet a certain standard. And they found out they're not meeting that standard, so now the states are requesting a waiver. Now, do you think that's right for the state to accept a waiver when they accepted all these criteria to begin with?
Good question, and
Several good
I'm going to go with
questions, actually.
3-minute allowances.
Well, that's 3 or 4 questions.
Yeah.
but you
I'm
can
going to go with
go with
3-minute
the first
allowances, okay? So, who would like to tackle that?
I'll go first. I think you and I had this conversation before, and I agree that the schools today are not what the schools were even back when I was in school. When I was in school, you sent your child to school to learn math, reading, and science, and I understand what you're saying about all the kind of ancillary things that now are offered. I am a social worker. I work actually for the Commonwealth, and I work with families, and as much as I can understand what you're saying, I think it is what it is. I think that families are more fragmented. I think families have two working parents, and I think for the school to achieve anything, they are going to have to address the things that we didn't used to address. And it always brings me back to when my daughter was in kindergarten, or maybe she was in first grade, but I ran into the kindergarten teacher who was carrying a bucket, 2 buckets down the hallway at the Bresnahan because she was going to have a lesson in hand washing and teeth brushing because she felt her kids didn't know that for whatever reason. And I thought, wow, our teachers really are assuming a lot more than just math and reading and science and all of that. But at the same time, I looked and thought, there's someone who in many ways is a parent role to maybe some child in her classroom, and there is a teacher who seems to really care about the kids. So as much as I see that trend and it does jump out at me that our teachers are expected to do so much more, doing the job that I'm doing, I just think for children to be able to succeed, that role is not going to change, and how things are today are not going to change. I'd love to see them change. I'd love to see empowered parents, empowered communities, but at this point, I see both sides of it in working and with my own children being in the school. So there's a lot of pressure on the teachers for that, and I don't know the answer to remedying it.
And why are teachers retiring at 55 and 56? When I was teaching, we retired at 65.
It's a tough job.
Kids these days wear you out by 55.
Yeah.
Any other responses to the gentleman's question?
I'll agree with Audrey that the services are needed in today's world. There's enough, as she said, working parents out there, parents who need the assistance with what's going on with their children in the schools, and the schools themselves need the assistance. So there's a need for these services. I think addressing some of the other concerns you had, talking about the money of the states, and the No Child Left Behind and the Reach to the Top. You're right, there is a lot of money out there, and that money is going to the states, and the states are using it for whatever they can. But I went to the budget forum that we had last year on the school budget, and the one slide that they showed me that really shocked me was the amount of our school budget that is going to state-provided services. And it's all required. It's all state mandated. You have to give this money to the state for this. You have to give this money to the state for this. So what we need to do is we need to figure out a way where we can look at the services that the state's requiring us to give the money for and try and come up with a plan that we can convince the state that maybe there's a better way of doing things rather than just giving them the money back. Because some of those things might be antiquated, but not really money well spent. Because we have such a limited amount of money to spend on our children, and we always need a lot more money to spend, that why don't we look at the money that we're spending, and if we can't not spend it, then we need to work with schools, communities like ours, other schools and other communities, and try and figure out a way that we can make the state look at what they're requiring and see if we can change it from that way.
Thank you, Peter.
I would just like to add one other comment to Joe, to Joe's question. That is that when we are considering everything that we need to provide, to keep a safe and comfortable environment for our students to learn in, which are some of the issues that Audrey was talking about, Peter mentioned. But it's not just financial resources, it's time. We don't really have enough time in school day to address all of those needs effectively. And So we do things like make choices. Our music program at the middle school was not reduced for lack of funding. It was reduced for lack of time. We didn't have a slot in which we could do chorus, except after school, when, as many of you know, many Newburyport kids tend to be over-programmed anyhow. And so I think we need to take a look at the time factor as well as the money factor as we're looking at that. And there are a lot of challenges because of it. A lot of challenges because of it.
My 4 children went to the middle school years ago. They had music, art. What has changed in the schedule that these courses are taken out? It's still, they go to school the same amount of time.
Yep.
My kids there was no languages taught in the middle school when I was principal, assistant superintendent. My 4 kids all took 4 years of Latin at the high school. How many years do they teach Latin in the high school now?
They don't teach Latin.
I know. But the time frame hasn't changed.
No, but the demands on that time frame have changed.
But isn't that up to you people to decide what time should be set in the curriculum?
Joe, how many classes, how many computer classes did your kids take when they went to the middle school? Did they learn how to?
Thank God none.
Well, my kids have to take computer classes because that's going to be a tool that they're going to use every day. So I'm with Nick. The demands on schools and the demands of just living in this century have changed significantly. I want to give you very direct answers to both of the first 2 questions that you asked. The first question was, should schools be doing all the things that they're trying to do now? And my answer to that is, I believe that you need to do what you need to do to keep kids engaged, to give kids the best shot at getting the best education they can. When I was growing up, the debate was, should inner city schools, which is where I went to school and where I grew up, should inner city schools be offering breakfast to kids? Should we be offering breakfast? You know, the kids come from home. Joe, you're educated, you've been an educator all your life. Does a hungry kid focus on what they have to learn? They don't. So by introducing a breakfast program, many inner city schools were able to really shift the dynamics dramatically. So I think that you need to, every generation has to respond to the demands that are out there. And I think that there are some pretty significant demands. When your kids were going to school, divorce was less common. And when I was growing up, I came from what used to be called a broken family. Now, half the kids in America come from a broken family, but it wasn't that way when I was growing up. So I think things have changed. And there was often, very often it took one income to support a family. I don't know any families among all the ones that I know where you don't have 2 parents working these days to make ends meet. The waiver question is an interesting question. And it has to do with the way No Child Left Behind, or is that, what do you call that?
No child gets ahead,
That's right.
guaranteed.
Yeah. The way that they evaluate whether you're doing what you need to do is this wonderful and arcane formula called average yearly progress. And it's a moving target. Every year, your kids have to improve by a certain amount. In the same way that Newburyport was screwed financially because we over-supported our schools when the Chapter 70 funding formula locked us in at the lowest reimbursement rate of cities anywhere in Massachusetts, one of the lowest rates. Massachusetts schools started at a very high place with their kids. Our schools have consistently ranked very, very high in the country. So we started way up here, and there's less and less room for us to, literally less and less room to improve. So we're at the point now where schools that are doing perfectly well by everybody else's standards are now falling behind because a subpopulation isn't making the kind of progress that we want to see, but that the federal government's expecting. So in this state, more and more schools are falling into restructuring. They're falling into having to make dramatic changes. That doesn't make any sense. Not when our schools, not when Massachusetts. I've seen studies that show Massachusetts has 6 best math and science scores in the world, comparing us to Japan and other countries. So there's a lot of room for improvement, but we started at a really high place, and there's no reason that we should have as many schools going through the administrative process for correcting average yearly progress as a state like Alabama, which is consistently ranked at the bottom. So the waiver is, I think the waiver may be an option. I think it should be an option for our schools, for our state, because I don't think that that's going to have any impact on the
Well, the
state.
president's already authorized the way.
Go ahead, Joe. Did you have another question?
I just want to say, President Obama just ruled that he's going to give the states a waiver. But you have to adhere to a particular question. And just one other point, did you people know what the criteria was when you accepted this?
When we accepted what the,
No child left behind?
I don't think we had an option.
Federal
It's
law.
federal law. We didn't have an option. The race to the top money, we had an option to accept, but no child left behind.
Joe, those are good questions and good points. And if need be, we can circle back around to them, because I think they go to a lot of the core challenges that our committee's facing. We've had some late people arrive, and I want to inform those folks that we're in a question and answer period. Feel free to ask any of the candidates or all of the candidates, preferably all of the candidates, your question. And my role is to moderate the time of their responses. So, sir.
Yeah, excuse me, on the issue of time to each of the four candidates, should you be elected, why or why not, would you consider adopting a longer school year? Assuming it was in your power, which is a different issue, of course. But if it came before you, and you were to make the decision whether to move to a longer school year or not, what would be your reasons, please, pro and con, to all four?
I'll jump in first, because I'm sitting on an ad hoc committee organized by the superintendent now to look at the school calendar. Our hope is to come up with a 2-year at a time school calendar. I personally believe that we could benefit from extended school days and a longer, a differently structured school year than we currently have. That's my belief. Sitting in that room with a number of other parents and the superintendent, my experience over the 10 years rang very true. The elementary school parents don't even want to think about starting before Labor Day. And the middle school and high school parents would be perfectly fine if you started August 15th. And that has been my experience for 10 years, that the elementary school parents, now I support that because I think that there's a lot more that we could be offering kids. And the school day simply, it's not long enough. That's what I think. Now, I would say that I think that's almost a non-starter at this point. That's really swimming upstream to try to have those conversations. We did apply, there was a state program at one point to look at extended day, and we had a study group at the middle school to look at extended day. I think it's a great idea. The state pulled the funding on that. And I think Barry Hopping still wants the group to meet and talk about it. I think there's a lot we can do academically, socially, recreationally with kids.
I would absolutely agree with Bruce. We do need both longer school days, and we do need more time in school during the school year. That will allow us some of the scheduling issues that we were talking about earlier. Find the time to bring foreign languages back, K through 12, in a way that it's a core part of the curriculum and not just a once a week for a few minutes exposure type program, which doesn't do anybody any good. Children learn a new language best when they're young. By the time they reach high school, it's much harder to teach them than at the elementary school. We're not capitalizing on that. So that's one of the reasons. Art programming. Arts right now are in a rotation with technology and with a lot of other things, and that needs to happen on a regular basis, whether it's choral music all the way through, whether it's drama. We don't have dance in our schools. So there are a lot of things that need to happen. At the high school level, having a longer day and more flexibility within the school year as well, I think will allow us to do some more creative things with scheduling, including better use of internships. Right now, with the kind of schedule we have, rotating schedule that we have, are almost impossible to achieve. We would like to make community service be a part of our graduation requirements, and if we can include that within a longer school day, it's much more likely to happen. So there are a lot of things a lot of benefits to this. The big issue that Bruce was alluding to and we need to work on, and that's one of the reasons I'd like to be on the school committee again, is precisely to work on this issue, is have the parents, work with the parents so they understand the benefits of this, and then find the monies to fund this kind of program, because it does have educational benefits, absolutely.
I would certainly support, as Bruce had said, in addition to a longer school day, restructuring of the school year, for a lot of the reasons that were mentioned here. But just looking, if you don't have a child who plays a sport, how nice it would be to offer more enrichment activities, more art, more music. The music program is different this coming year than it was in past years, but I know when my daughter was in the middle school, if you played an instrument, you were married to that program, and you did not have the opportunity to do several other programs, which was unfortunate. So I, too, certainly would extend, and I think it would require some work with the parents, but at the same time, I think that that there are a lot of parents out there that would understand it. And it is conducive to working parents, so I'm not sure it would be that difficult. But as we had talked about before, back years ago, what they offered and didn't have computers and what they have now, if the biggest struggle is finding the time in the day, then certainly a longer school day would help support that.
I don't know if you've been in a school the last 2 weeks of June, but it's pretty much garbage time for the kids. They're sitting there, they're doing nothing, they're kicking around. It's really a waste of time. So whether or not you're adding time to the school year or adding time to the school day, it doesn't matter about the amount of time you're adding, it's about the quality of what's going on during the time that they're there. So if you want to add time, then you need to have a program where you're utilizing all that time up to the very last moment that the kids are in school. If it's an internship program, if it's based on project-based learning, really what you want is a quality education for the children all the time. So it doesn't matter the number of days. I think that it's archaic that people think, oh, 180 days, my child has learned enough to move on to the next grade level. That's ridiculous. I mean, your child has learned enough to move on to the next grade level when they've learned enough to move on to the next grade level. And you're going to do that before 180 days, after 180 days, as long as they're getting good instruction and they're excited about learning, they're going to move on. So you have to see what's being taught and how it's being taught and carve out that time so that it's useful time and it's not just adding a number.
Just one follow-up, please. If this should happen, it would mean, I assume, reopening the contract with the Teachers Association. So where does the Teachers Association stand on this kind of an issue, or do we have an idea?
We do have some idea when we did the investigations for the Moreland School, and it was mixed, as you might expect. There were some teachers who were said, yeah, so long as I get paid for my time, I'll put the time in. There were other teachers that said, no, my schedule requires me to be done by 3 o'clock for whatever childcare reasons or whatever they had after the school day. What came out of that discussion was a approach to flexible time, where some teachers would come, start early, and would be able to leave earlier in the day, and then there were other teachers that would come later on in the day and stay through the end of school. There's also one of the guidelines that for success that the extended learning time program offers is that You should make it optional for the teachers to, especially those teachers that are already in the system, to sign up for the longer day or not.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want to comment on teacher reaction?
Um,
That's the number question.
No, I mean, my sense is that it is as well. I would agree with Nick that it's mixed. And that some teachers are going to need incentives and some teachers are going to really see this as something that they get jazzed when their kids are jazzed about learning. So I would say that. I mean, I wanted to offer one more comment on the calendar question.
Go ahead.
I'm proposing, and I have always asked us to look at the classroom as flexible, that the walls should be permeable, the community should come in, the kids should come out of the classroom, and the same thing with the school calendar. We don't offer summer school here anymore in Newburyport, and we used to offer summer school. And summer school traditionally has been offered as a time of remediation. But why not offer, there are courses, particularly in the sciences, there are courses that you could offer in the summer that would get kids out at the wildlife refuge, working there, that you can't offer any other time of the year because those opportunities are not there. Why not offer some of those classes during the summers to kids? Electives, but you can do research work at the wildlife refuge, and that's the one example that comes to me in the summer that you can't do in the winter. And we have these kids, and some of them are hungry for this kind of stuff. So let's think a little bit kind of, I got teased a lot when I first ran 10 years ago for saying, let's think outside the box. But let's think outside the box.
Do any of the others have additional questions on that point? Okay, great, thank you. Dr. Orlando.
I think this gentleman here is quite correct. It has really a lot to do with quality. I've sort of been engaged for 6, 7, 8 years now, and so the two people on the sides there know where I'm going to be coming from with this, but I think this is a very valid question when you talk about quality. I have 4 kids in the school system, and to date I've been proud of the education that they've received here. We spend a fair amount of money on it. We have very good teachers. We have a vibrant community. However, there are some deficiencies. Over the last 5 to 6 years, the school committee members have been asked to just figure out ways to cut, axe, dissect, if you will, things out of the school system that are what we're talking about here, whether it's foreign language, music, or what have you. So as school committee members, the question becomes, yes, we can talk about quality, but what do you plan to do as a school committee member when it comes time to start axing things to actually positively have an impact, to bring these things to reality? And what they will tell you I call is, I don't want the fluff, tell me the stuff. What would you do next year in the budget process when the superintendent comes to you and says, these are the things we need to ask? And that's all you're going to be able to do is sign off or not sign off on the budget. What would you propose to do to make realities out of some of these issues as a school committee member and a citizen of Newburyport?
Why is it in the last 3 decades funding for schools have doubled, yet their testing have not increased correspondingly? Money is not the solution to schools.
I didn't talk about money, sir, but I...
But incidentally, you're talking about money.
In fairness, Joe, I'm going to let the candidates respond to the question.
Well, I just want to respond to, he talks a lot to school
Joe,
committee meetings. And
Thanks for tipping us off to the question you're going to ask after we respond to Ralph's.
Well, I just wanted,
We can circle back to that, Joe.
he talked quite a bit at school committee meetings, I know, so I want to have my say.
Okay. I'll go to the candidates. What would you do?
All right, I'll jump in. I think there are a number of things we need to do. advocated for, and slowly we are moving in the direction of starting the budget conversation earlier. Starting the budget conversation in February, to me, there's no percentage in that. I think early on in the school year, we can predict what it is we're going to need. We know what we need. We've known what we need every year since we cut it, frankly. So I think those conversations need to start earlier, and they need to be as specific as we possibly can be. Not just specific about what we're going to lose, but specific about what we're going to need to add. And I don't want those conversations kind of pulled out of a bag in March. I want city council members to hear us talking about what it is we need. I want the community to hear us talking about what it is that we need. And I want to find ways to creatively advocate for some of those things. Money may not be the answer to everything, but $250,000 will bring world languages back to 2 grades at the middle school. That's what it cost. That's what it cost. I can't make it cost any less than that. You know, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. Everybody loves a free market, but then when the market starts setting a price that doubles, that adds 50% to the cost of a superintendent over the 10 years that I've been here, that's what the market bears, and that's what we have to deal with. So I think there's more that we can do. I know that there is more that we can do. Ralph and I worked on a revenue task force. There's still a number of strategies for generating more revenue or extracting revenue that already exists and reassigning it. We just have to have the will to do it. That's what I think.
Thank you, Bruce. Audrey, you want to go next?
Well, yeah, I will jump in because we all know who has the purse strings in the community, and it's the city council, and it's the mayor. And I said in the beginning that I think a school committee needs to work very closely with the city council. That's been done better at different times. I will say that when I first was on the city council, there was a lot of distrust. There was a lot with the school committee and with their budget. Nobody could understand it. There was always a bottom line, but we never saw all the figures that came before the bottom line. That's continued to improve. And it substantially improved at one point because there actually was a time when the school committee was going to be cutting a lot of programming. There was a special meeting with the city council. We were able, as a city council, to understand what it was they were talking about and able to secure that funding. I think that the school committee and the city council need to work closely together. I know there's a joint ed committee. Sometimes I don't know what that purpose of that committee is. It's worked better at sometimes than it has at others. But the bottom line is the city council holds the purse strings, and that's who we need to work with. And I think for the most part, when people can understand it, they want to fund our schools. The city council members want us to have good schools. It speaks volumes to our city, it speaks volumes to them. But I think that will only continue to work well as long as the school committee and the administration stays transparent in their budget, which has been much improved than it was 10 years ago.
Thank you, Audrey. Nick, Peter?
I'm gonna, I'm not an expert on the budget. I'm not an expert on the school committee, city council relationship. I will go back to something I said earlier, and that is we need to look at the money that's being spent that we have to spend because we have no choice because it's state mandated or it's mandated federally. And I really think it's important that school committees around Massachusetts work together to change those costs, change those programs that we have to spend money for. We're not going to see school budgets increasing dramatically. It's not the time for that. Massachusetts isn't making as much revenue as it used to make, so the money's not going to be there. So we have to look at our fixed costs that we have no control over and see what we can do to change it. I don't think it's a short-term prospect, a short-term fix. I mean, we want all of these programs, but we're handcuffed by the money that we have to spend for a lot of different things. I mean, and we have to look at the money that we spend. For our teachers, you know, and teacher unions and things like that. These are all conversations that people are putting their feet in the ground and saying, we can't change this, and it's time to figure out a way that these things can change, because we're nickel and diming our schools to death, and we're losing all these programs, and it's just not right.
Nick?
I'm going to start from just a slightly different point of view. And I think the way I understood the question, Dr. Orlando, you were asking not what would we do to find more revenue, but what would we do to, when the superintendent comes to us and says, hey, something's got to go, and these are our choices as to what.
That's more the thrust of the question, because what would you do?
I think this is one of the reasons I'm very eager to have a start with the budget process earlier. We have a strategic plan that was put together by a whole variety of members of the community that has been updated, and most recently it has been updated from the results of some of the ad hoc committees that the superintendent has had on different specific subjects. And that provides a direction for us. And as we get to the point where we need to take a look at what we have, I think the approach that we've taken in the past has been one of, let's spread the pain equally across all schools. While in principle it sounds like the fair thing to do, in some cases that may mean that we're taking certain programs out across all schools. That is not a good idea. Or that we are reducing some programs to a level of mediocrity, which is not a good idea. So I think having the time to really get into the educational priorities, how they tie into the strategic plan, why the superintendent and his staff are recommending the cuts that they are recommending. I'm sure nobody likes to recommend cuts. I almost hate to say the words, a superintendent recommending cuts. But what I should say, the priorities that the superintendent is recommending. Really get into understand that and have a discussion, make sure we understand the long-term repercussions of that, and make sure that that's a public discussion involving people of the community, so that we can say, okay, we're going to be talking about, we now have the time to say we're going to be talking about foreign languages and what that means, or we're going to be talking about what is happening to the music program and what that means in the context of these budget discussions.
Thank you. I'll start with Ari and then Ms. John. Go ahead.
Quick question. Nick, you just alluded to having discussions with the community. Peter, you alluded to perhaps having students doing some kind of internship program. Bruce, you alluded to the out-of-the-box thinking and students working with businesses in town. And Audrey, you also referred to your time in the city council. So the question I have for the four of you, real quick, is using existing committees and groups in town, specifically the Youth Commission, the Beacon Coalition, the Chamber of Commerce, what are the existing relationships right now from your perspective? And what are the relationships that you'd like to have going forward with both the entity and the constituents they represent, such as businesses of the Chamber and youth of the Youth Commission? From a programmatic, from a financial, however you'd like to respond.
So I think, just to summarize, Ari, your question is like, for the existing framework, what would you work with now differently to achieve your goals? Okay. Nick?
I'll jump in there because I think we've got some wonderful examples of where things are working very well in our community and our schools. Programs that are really nationally recognized for the kind of work that they're doing. The first one I will mention would be the Education Business Coalition, which is not a fundraising relationship. It is businesses actually working with our teachers to encourage to achieve educational objectives. The EBC has taken some time since they joined forces with the NEF a year and a half ago to rethink their whole mission, working with the administration to really understand where businesses can best be of use to this community. We'd had, for a number of years, we had participation, maybe 18, 19 businesses a year that were actively involved in the schools. We had an event earlier this year, which was a kickoff event for our new approach to things, where we had 39 businesses present, all very excited about being a part of it. So we have a lot of good support from businesses coming into the schools and working with us. I think there are certain groups that I would like to see us more involved with. The Choral Society, the Art Association are two that I would call out. We are developing some wonderful stuff now in conjunction with the Customs House. We've done great work through the Gulf of Maine Institute as well. But then there are the green collaboratives. There's a lot of the civic organizations, and we're finding ways of making connections to them as well. And for that to work, it needs to be a personal relationship between the teacher and the people in those organizations. And we're finding more and more ways to make those connections. I think we were all very encouraged to see the excitement about co-developing a program around a play between the teachers who are directing the play and Andy Egmont and the youth services, and what that's going to mean in the Beacon Coalition and how they can collaborate together. And we're going to see more and more of that. As Bruce says, we can no longer think of schools as buildings with walls. Schools and education happens 24/7, and it happens throughout the community. And so, are there organizations that we need to reach out to? All of the ones we haven't reached out to yet. And can we improve relationships? I think the EBC is an example of places where even good relationships can be improved even further.
Thank you. Audrey.
I hope that this answers your question directly. It might be a little indirect. But I too agree that there are organizations that we could reach out to. But then I look as to how do we reach out? And historically, how we reach out is we throw out an idea and we say to people, who would like to be a part of this? Or the school committee meetings, not always well attended. Is it because people don't care? No, all those parents at home care, but they don't all come to the meetings. And so I've got to lately thinking about, we want to think broadly, but we want our invitation to come narrowly. And to start tapping into the resources of our teachers who have direct contact. I go to an example where someone asked me to serve on a committee. And it was a teacher who said, your name came up as someone who might like to serve because you've done this, this, and this. And I thought, well, I have done that, and I could serve. And this was around theater. But that grew. So in addition to the programs or the groups that are out there that, yes, we can reach out to, I think successfully to be able to reach out to, we need to narrowly start inviting people and enlisting our teachers to be thinking about the parents in their classrooms and to know the parents in their classrooms and maybe where someone has expertise and to start building small to reach out to those groups, because I don't think we're doing that well. I know that in the past there have been concerns or statements made about if parents really cared, they'd be at the school committee meeting. And I suppose there are some that if they care, they'd be at the school committee meeting, but I also know that the majority of parents do care, but they just don't come to the school committees because of all the other demands. And to tap into the expertise of some of the little people in reaching out to the bigger people.
If I could add on to that, for years I've been suggesting to the school committee that we do ad hoc committees. We bring in people from the community, we bring in teachers, and we look at ideas, we look at issues. Mark came in and said, let's do ad hoc committees, which is great. We support it. They've been very, very productive. So that's one way to build partnerships. To some extent, there was something really, I think, very valid about what Nick said. A lot of this depends on relationships. Relationships, you talked about the Beacon Coalition, you talked about the Youth Commission. The Youth Commission exists today because Audrey's husband and I wrote the first grants, did the research, presented to the city council about the need for a youth commission, and we got one. The Beacon Coalition was founded by the mayor and chair of the school committee, Donna Holiday. So we have some of those connections. There are a lot more connections. The most exciting thing that I've seen happening in the last year and a half in the schools is the Gulf of Maine initiative. It is mind-boggling the opportunity that we have to get kids out into the community, to become a center, a national center for place-based education. That's going to take some funding, not a lot, but some. Is it an investment? When I started on the school committee, and my life experience as a manager, as a nonprofit administrator, as a teacher, there is an inclination when you're asking people to do some heavy lifting, thinking, grappling with issues, to knee-jerk say no. No, it's very easy to get to no. And I usually ask people, give me 5 minutes of conversation around, if it was going to work, what would it look like? What would we need to have? We may end up back at no, but very often those conversations about, well, what are we talking about here? What do we want to have? What do we really want? You begin to find ways to make it happen. The Newburyport Learning Enrichment Center. That exists because the head of the housing authority at that time called the superintendent and said, do you know that 9 out of every 10 kids who grow up here drop out of high school? They don't graduate. And the superintendent didn't believe it. She came out there, it was Pappy Smith. She walked around out there, and one of the kids, some kids were playing out there with their mom, and the mom said, who is that? And the kid said, that's the superintendent. That's Pappy Smith, that's our superintendent. And the mom said, no, that's not the superintendent. No superintendent has ever been out here to Keller Park. No superintendent's ever been here. That's not the superintendent. She pushed us. Danny and I wrote some grants. We got some money. That program now has completely reversed the dropout rate. So on a shoestring, with imagination and interest, you can engage the community to do really great things. We need to do a lot more of that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just going to speak from a classroom perspective. As a teacher myself, I've had many opportunities to partner with many different organizations or people. And there are so many people who want to help, and they often help. They don't know what that help is going to look like. So when you're trying to figure out, that's where the frustration comes from. So what really needs to, that's just from a curriculum classroom perspective, what really needs to drive that partnership is have to attach whatever the curriculum is that the children are studying. My level, elementary level, that's coming from me. I'm creating the environment for my children, and I'm planning my curriculum links so that they're beneficial to the children in the class. But as you get older, as the children get older and they're taking charge of their education, by the time they're reaching the high school level, they should be driving the partnerships themselves. They should be sitting there in their classes, working with their teachers, coming up with a project or a program that enhances their learning experience. And then for the community itself, they just have to have the patience to know that you've offered your services, and don't be frustrated if this year someone doesn't use you, but you'll be used later on. And just making sure that everyone has that ability to say, yes, I'm here for you when you need it, but just be patient enough for the students to come find you, because they're coming to find you and they're taking advantage of everything we have in Newburyport. There's so many different things to take advantage of. It's just going to enhance the learning experience of the children, and that's really what it's all about.
Thank you. Sir?
Yes, you've covered some of the topic that I would like to ask you to address. The first word, though, is excellence. And our new superintendent has come in and said he wants to see excellence in his schools. And I'm all in favor of that. So the question is, how do you see excellence in schools? And how do you think we can arrive at excellence in the schools? And may I give a follow-up question afterwards?
Sure. Excellence. Peter, it looks like you're...
Yeah, for excellence for me, It's about motivated students who are going over and beyond what they're required to do. There are children who are actively engaging in learning. There are children who are sharing that love of learning with the people around them, and they're participating in any experience where they're going to be able to learn even more. They're motivated and excited, and they want to continue to learn. And for me, it's not necessarily test scores. I think test scores come out as a result of students who are excited to learn and motivated to learn. And you have to look, and there are some students who are still motivated and excited to learn, who have that love of learning, who aren't going to necessarily test well. But that shouldn't be a black mark against them, because if they're students who are continuing to go on and continuing to do things, they're going to be beneficial to the community, they're going to be beneficial to themselves and their families, and that's what excellence in learning is all about for me.
Audrey?
Well, excellence, in my opinion, for our schools, it is the same thing. It's not about test scores. It's about children being supported. And in thinking of my own family, my own children, I have different academic levels. I have different interests. I have kids who play sports. I have kids that don't play sports. I have kids who struggle. I have kids who excel. But I, for the most part, have felt that wherever they are, that they've been supported by their teachers, by their guidance counselors, and I think that that is a true blue sign of excellence, which then carries over to excellence being that a child can leave our school system and there are doors open. There's not just one door, there are several doors. There is college, there's community college, there's four-year college, there's a work program, there's an internship, whatever may be the path, but that our kids can leave schools with options. And certainly as a school district and a school system, we want our kids to go on to school. But recognize that that's not what all of the kids are going to do, and to just not have them channel to, if you're not going to college, here's your only other option. Because you either go to college or you do this. And I think excellence in my mind is those two things, that our kids are supported and they're offered, they come out with a feeling that there are options, and options that can be afforded to them.
Good, thank you.
Excellence is a function, to me, I would say, of creating lifelong learners. Education isn't something that starts when you come to kindergarten and ends when you leave high school or anywhere else. And our commitment to our students should not be that. But it should be to create lifelong learners. And for that to happen, I think there needs to be a nurturing, the support, the way Audrey talked about, of the students' different passions. Because each student will have different things that they are excited about. And you can see it in the kindergarten class where, one child wants to play with ponies and the other one wants to play with dinosaurs. You can see it on the playground where there are kids that are just going to hang out by the swings and talk, and others are going to get involved in a big, vigorous game of kickball. You can see it in the classrooms where some kids are great and get it when it comes to math, and kids can put together the most incredible poetry. So we need to be able to tap in and support those passions wherever they arise and whenever they arise. Because that's what makes learning relevant to the kid, and that's what makes learning a habit for them, not something they do for a period of time. And so my definition of excellence is creating that atmosphere where people can really enjoy and learn to enjoy learning.
I have sort of a pragmatic view of what excellence is. I don't think excellence means at the top of your class. I think excellence means that you are doing the best you can and you are being supported in doing that, and you embrace that aspect of doing things. So to me, an excellent school system is when you have a class of 25 kids that learn in 18 different ways, that are interested in 4,000 different things, And the teacher in that classroom is able to take a lesson and engage every kid in the way that they learn, how they learn. Able to take those kids that want to learn this and then take it someplace else, follow it a different, that all of that is happening in a classroom. So that whether the kid has challenges, or whether the challenge that the kid has is that the curriculum, we're undershooting with the curriculum. That it's a child that gets it really quickly. That they can be served in a classroom by a teacher with supports to become literally the best that they can be. That to me is excellence. Amesbury, for a number of years, has had working relationships with several colleges that allow some of the kids at the high school to begin taking college classes. We don't. We don't. And why don't we? I don't know. We've talked about it. We're pursuing it now. It's an initiative that the mayor would like to see us doing. It's overdue. Those are the kinds of things, those are the kinds of connections that we can make that really provide a lot more opportunity for people. And again, the whole Gulf of Maine initiative is just astonishing to me. It's what it can do. And that is really all about excellence. That we have the right teachers teaching the right kids in the right way at the right time with the right amount of resources, then you can't help but be excellent.
Thank you. You asked for a follow-up.
Please. Well, you've all, in some senses, answered this question already. Bruce more specifically than the rest. But it has to do with the word equality. I get the sense that many people feel that if you don't treat everybody just the same as everybody else, that they are not being treated equally, and that somehow or other is the great way. And so I'm interested. Bruce has addressed it by saying that 25 kids can be treated in 25 different ways simultaneously, and I have trouble with that. But I would like to find out, how do we find, well, I had one classmate who was terrible at math. I was always pretty good at it. But he went on to be a professor at Harvard University, speaking 20 different foreign languages, et cetera, et cetera. No way could I hold a candle to that. How do we take our best kids? I noticed in the MCAS, they lump the top of the bracket with the passing. And I'm offended. And I wonder how it is we could urge the kids who normally sleep in the back of the class or who read novels during math class to actually get out and do. And I'll stop.
Okay.
I think you raise a very interesting question when you talk about equality or equity. And we had a subcommittee a couple of years back on policy that began tackling this issue. Bruce was part of it, Cordy Bechtel and I were the three that really went round and round and round about the issue. And what we came down with a definition for that was something that I think Bruce already has spoken to. And that what we are talking about is equity and opportunity. And that means people need to be able to achieve their potential. And what and how do we define that potential is where we really got bogged down. It's not something that's talked about or even written much about. Because we did try to find, equity policies in schools, and actually we only found one that was in Toronto or something that had attempted to do something like that. The bottom line, I think, is that we really need to be able to provide enough support so that the student can pursue their own education. A teacher cannot provide the same exact support for each student, nor should they. The students require different levels of support. We spend a lot of time the administrators spend a lot of time talking to us about differentiated learning and how we achieve that in the classroom. And it's a big challenge for teachers. And we do spend a lot of time in professional development making sure we cover that. Personally, I think we have been looking at covering the needs end of the spectrum more than the advanced, as Bruce said, the people that are challenged by lack of challenge. And we need to look at that. I don't know that I'd call it gifted because every student is in their own way, has their gifts and abilities. But we need to truly identify ways in which we can work, have teachers work with those students who are passionate about a subject and can communicate that passion to other students who might be bored by it.
Great. Thank you, Nick. Peter, go ahead.
I like your question because way back when I was about to do my student teaching, when I was going to do my student teaching at Newton North High School, and my girlfriend at the time, her mother was a teacher at, I can't remember the school district, but a very she public school district in Westchester County, New York. And she said, oh, well, we only would ever think of hiring teachers from Newton North High School because it has such a great reputation. They're good enough to hire from. And then I went and did my student teaching, and it was a great school, had a really great top program, and had a really successful program for the kids at the bottom. But the middle kids were ignored because they weren't garnering the reviews that the top kids were, and their SPED program wasn't garnering their SPED program was garnering great reviews too. So it's the middle kids who are the ones who are always at risk. And that, as a teacher, has always stuck with me because those are the students that you really need to reach out to, and those are the students that you really want to motivate because you're right, they're the ones who are going to end up teaching at Harvard someday if they're given the right example or the right push. And I think if you talk to your classmates, they'll say, oh, there's this one teacher who. And if you talk to a bunch of your classmates over a variety of years, one or two teachers' names are going to be the ones that are always mentioned. So it's the quality of teaching that students are getting that is so important. And it's how the teachers are reaching out. And the teachers need to know how to reach out to different types of learners. They might not necessarily be able to reach out 25 different ways, but if they're aware that there's 25 different styles and they know how to mold their teaching style to help groups of children, then you're going to have a whole bunch of children later on who are going to go back and say, you know what, I really had a great time with Mr. Smith, and that's where I am today. And we just need to be identifying those teachers and having those teachers in our schools, because the more great teachers we have in our schools, the better the education we're going to have for our students.
Okay, thank you.
I was thinking after Nick, when you were speaking about, achievement and defining achievement, I'm not sure exactly how you said it, and I understand what you were saying, but I also caution teachers in setting the achievement level for the kids. I think that teachers need to set the bar here, and because I think that if a teacher challenges a child to your achievement level right now indicates that you probably should think about, going to work after high school and not considering college, that the child will think that they're not being supported or think that that's their only option. So I think in achievement, the teachers need to think up here. And there will be kids that will come and hit that bar, and there will be kids that don't hit that bar. But I think we need to channel all the support, and like you said, with teachers molding their teaching styles to the best that they can. But we need to set the standard high for all the kids across the board. And the fairness issue, I think, actually plays into it. And I don't think it is always fair. I think a struggling child maybe shouldn't have as much work as another child, or an overachieving child should be afforded extra work. But, you know, I had a child who was told, you probably won't do this because I don't think you do it well. She set out to prove them wrong. But it still comes back. She often says, she didn't stick with what the particular thing was, and she often says, well, that teacher did say I wasn't going to be good at that. And it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, which really is unfortunate. So I just think that achievement does need to be somewhat of the same in the standard of it. And then we work with the kids to bring them up to as far as we can with what we have available to us.
Zab, I have a few ways that I want to try to respond to this. First is that programs serving those kids who need greater challenges academically were dismantled in this system 10 years ago. I didn't think it was a great idea, but that was the prevailing philosophy in the school system at that time. When you teach to the middle, when you teach, you bring everybody up. There aren't going to be 25 different learning styles among 25 kids in a classroom. My experience is that they cluster. And you can really scale up or scale down your teaching. It's a skill, it's something that we know how to do. Audrey talked about expectations. If I see another study that proves, again, that if a teacher expects a student is going to be here, you increase the likelihood dramatically that that's where the student is going to be. That is a considerable factor in how kids succeed, what the teachers think they can do. And if you set, I've always said, and I've worked in some very difficult and challenging communities, if you set low expectations, those are the expectations that people will rise to. And that is as far as they will go. So I don't believe in setting low expectations. I agree 100% with Audrey. You set high expectations, you give kids the support they need. It's interesting to me because one of the biggest resources that we have that I don't know that we know how to quite effectively use are the students themselves. And when you have differentiated teaching going on in a classroom, and you have a classroom that has a wide spectrum of students, it is entirely possible, and Peter will tell you this because it happens every single day in his classroom, that kids will become a learning community where not only is it important for me to learn this, but it's important for my friend to learn this as well. So I'm going to make sure I'm going to sit down and spend some time talking with him. He's going to learn it. Those learning communities, in my experience, are really enhanced by having multiple ages in a classroom. It's a very fundamental principle that Maria Montessori suggested. I've seen it work in classrooms that I taught in as a Montessori teacher. Peter sees it happening every day. That kind of a mix is really helpful. And I remember I went to a previous superintendent and I said, we have one classroom that's got multi-age. It's the Bresnahan. It's got 2 grades. Why don't we have more? And the superintendent looked at me and said, it's impossible to find people who are licensed and can teach multiple grades. There's nobody out there who knows how to do it. And I told the superintendent, I said, I will have 30 resumes on your desk tomorrow morning, and mine will be at the top of that list. Because anybody who's been trained to teach Montessori style knows what it's like to teach for 2nd and 3rd grade together. So that's where that flexibility needs to come in. And you have to keep in mind, you know, people have asked me, I've been 10 years on the school committee, people say, you know, so what's it like? Why do you keep doing it? Well, it's like riding shotgun on a glacier. You get there, but it takes a long time. It's like turning an aircraft carrier around. It takes 30 miles to turn an aircraft carrier around. We're talking about changing an institutional culture, how we do business. That's not going to happen overnight. You know, that's going to happen as, okay, sorry. Back to you. I just cleared it up too.
So, I know that our program was scheduled to end at 8 o'clock. Here's what I'll suggest unless you all revolt, which you're welcome to do. This is a citizen event. I'm going to suggest that each of our candidates take 1 minute, make a closing statement. And if you have additional questions, please stay. Please ask them the questions. You are the voters. However, this is the time for the revolt if you want me to just keep going with the questions. seeing those hands. So, in no particular order, I'll start at this end with Nick, and we'll go down the other way. 1 minute for a closing statement.
Very quickly, I think I remember the time that I was having difficulties in school, probably in 3rd or 4th grade. It seemed to be a tough time for me. The words that I most often heard out of my mother or father's mouth were focus, focus, focus. And I feel that way today as well, because I think there are 3 areas in which we need to continue to focus in our schools. First is focus on student achievement. And by that, we're talking about all students. What needs to happen? What is the learning that takes place that is going to make them effective citizens in the future? The second area we need to focus on, which we didn't really address here, is funding. We have a great opportunity for some new schools, for restoring a school that needs a lot of help as well. But equally important is finding the money to support the programs that happen within those buildings. We have been chasing the same $1.5 million for the past 8 years. Every year when the superintendent comes to us with a budget, it's always in terms of what the superintendent would like to be doing and where we are, there's always a difference of about $1.5 million. It's the same $1.5 million that we now have to pay for transportation that at one point was paid for by the state. So we need to deal with that funding issue, and part of the way we deal with that is to really work with the city and make school funding and city funding a long-term planning process. And finally, the third area of focus is what we're doing here today, focus on communication. Thank you for coming out and being a part of this, and your questions taught me a lot. The answers from my colleagues, wonderful. I thank you as well. Given me a lot of food for thought. Thanks.
Thanks, Nick. In the interest of fairness, the remaining 3 will also have 2 minutes.
Good. You can't go to one.
Go ahead.
I'm the type of guy who usually sits in the back row, doesn't ask questions, and slips out under the radar. And I would like to say I'm not a politician, but I can't do that now because I throw myself at the ring. But I'm finding that I'm not a very good politician. But it is important to me as a parent and as an educator and as a member of this town that our schools stop trending towards let's cut, and stop trying to put our fingers in the dike to stop the dike from bursting. We need to figure out a way to move forward, to continue we maintain excellence in our schools despite ourselves. And that's, I think, a lot to do with the people of this, of Newburyport. Now we need to build upon what we naturally have and commit to making our children care about their city, care about their education, and walk away feeling that they've gotten the best quality education that they possibly can. And I hope that we can, no matter what happens, that that's a commitment that everyone believes in. So thank you. It's been an interesting evening for me as well.
Very good. Audrey.
Well, I too want to thank everyone for coming out, and I know it's not easy coming out once you're at home, but I just want to say I'm familiar with the schools. I have a 19-year-old who went through the school system up through 8th grade. My other children are in here now. I know the schools. I know the city. I've had experience on the city council, and I'd like to combine all of that to be a part of the process for our schools to move forward, to make our good schools great schools. And I want to be part of the process and part of the solution where we're struggling or where we're not happy with where we're at. And that's why I threw my hat in the ring to run for a school committee. And I want to thank everybody here for participating. It was good.
Thank you. I also want to thank everybody who turned out. I have to say, I've been around for 10 years, and I'm still excited about these conversations. I'm still excited about what's possible in the schools. I'm still thrilled when students come in and tell us some of the things that they're doing. In the 10 years that I've been here, I have to say that I've never seen the pieces begin to assemble the way that I have over the last year or so. The energy that Mark has brought to the system is really wonderful. The relationships that he has begun to build with teachers, with administrators, watching him build a team, the focus that he has really provided for us on student achievement, that stuff is all really, really exciting. You know, people have asked me, well, you know, are you going to run for mayor, are you going to run for city council? This is the level at which I think I can make the biggest contribution, the best contribution, working with the schools. It's the best work I know how to do in government. I can't imagine anything that would be less important. It's been a privilege to serve for 10 years. It's been a privilege to serve with some of the people that I've had the opportunity to serve with. I'm still ready. I got 4 more years in, that's for sure. Thank you.
Very good. I too want to thank all of you for coming, and I'll give you a homework assignment. I'm relatively sure you're going to vote, otherwise you wouldn't have been here. Bring someone to the ballot box with you, okay? Only through the power of our voices do we affect any positive change. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, I'm happy to stick around if anybody has any questions, accusations,
Complaints.
complaints.